Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Aaron. Get a Jetta 13 on the Vortex. For those of you familiar with me on that site, I've got the pretty extensive Passat builds that I have going on there. Behind me is the most current Passat build, which is the less than average, as I've titled it, which is the V6 30 valve Franken whatever that I'm slapping together. Gene Sevilla, if I'm saying his name correctly, just sent me a fresh set of taillights for these guys. I just picked them up as spares, but I'm going to de-amber them for the build. It's something that I do on most of my Passat builds, just to kind of clean up the features a little bit, just to add a little kind of like, hidden whatever that people may or may not notice, but I kind of like it. So I'll show you what a before and after looks like, and then also how to perform it too. Alright, so moving to the workbench, you of course will need to start with a nice surface to work on, something padded obviously so that you don't mar up your lights when you flip them over to do work. You're obviously going to need your set of tail lights that you will de-amber. It's good to work with a set of needle nose pliers, long or short, doesn't matter too much. And then the last thing I work with is going to be what is a plastic welder. I've got two of them. I have one that I use for actually plastic welding, and then this is my kind of dirty boy that I use for kind of like melting and molding parts. You can pick these up at Harbor Freight for like 10 or 15 bucks. It's a really nice tool to have, and you can kind of put them through the ringer and they just take abuse. Also really good for owning like Mark IIs when all that brittle plastic tends to break and hard to source those guys, so you can just repair it. What we're going to be working on is de-ambering the turn signals here, so you can kind of see the amber hue that's behind the main lens. If you turn the tail light around, you can see this amber cup here. That's what we're going to be taking out in pieces. And the reason I use a welding rod here is because I'm able to melt larger chunks and pull those out with the needle nose versus using something like a Dremel tool that kind of creates like a lot of dust and FOD that is harder to pull out of these guys. Even with compressed air and a vacuum, it still kind of leaves a lot of residual behind, and so this tends to just be the quicker, easier process. So the first thing you do before you start going to town with your plastic welder is just kind of coming up with a plan. I'll use this in place of my plastic welder right now just to demonstrate. You want to make sure when you're performing that if you're melting over here, you're not laying into any other housing plastic here, so you kind of like prevent minimal damage. But what I typically do is just do large sections, so I will just kind of quarter these out and try to pull them out in the biggest chunks possible so that I'm not left with a bunch of little pieces to pull out. So what I'm doing now is I'm sticking the welding rod to the very end of the amber cup, and then I'm just pulling it forward, and it's melting through pretty quickly, and I'm just dividing this cup into quadrants. And I basically want to do this and make them into quadrants first, instead of working on trying to get each quadrant out like one at a time, so that I don't end up pulling out one piece, losing it, and having to chase that around the rest of the 3/4 cup that is still left intact. So you kind of want to perform a process that's going to enable success once you're ready to make your final removal. So now I've got this sectioned off in quadrants 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see my slits. 2, 3, 4, and now I'm going to start to work on removing the center here, and I should be able to pull everything else out. So I was able to pull out the amber bulb in 4 pieces. Pretty easy. Took me about 15 minutes. And here's kind of the aftermath. It's a little difficult to get in there with the plastic welder. You kind of have some inherent risk of getting some heat exposure here. It's not too big of a deal as long as you don't close in your ID at all, but make sure if you do, try to clean it back up. The biggest thing that you don't want to do is damage these guys where the bulb tray will clip into. And here's a side-by-side, ambered, de-ambered. So You've got your de-ambered. That's what it looks like. And then here is a stock with the amber. That's it. If you want to find other DIYs that I've put together, you can find me on Vita Vortex, Get a Jetta 13. It's a ridiculous screen name I put together when I was like 15 and had a Golf Jetta or something like that. I don't remember, too many Volkswagens ago. I have a lot on there for the V6 and then also for the Mark II platform.